So today we will be discussing one of the most fundamental sugyas in Hilchos Shabbos, and that is kelacher yad. And the sugya of kelacher yad has many sources in Shas, many sources in Masechet Shabbos. Daf Tzadik Beis regarding Meleches Eitzur, it's a Mishnah, but it's many other sugyas, and one of the fundamental sugyas is in Ksubas Daf Samach, when the Gemara says, Goineach, Yoinek b'Shabbos, because it's Mefara kelacher yad u'b'mukim tsar, and sinner she'olo bo kaskasim memachoy baraglo b'mukim hefsed loy gazru rabbanon, and that's a huge kiddush, which is not found in Masechet Shabbos, but only in Masechet Ksubas, that regarding kelacher yad we are mekel b'mukim tsar and b'mukim hefsed. Is that a basic rule? That we're always mekel kelacher yad b'mukim tsar, b'mukim hefsed? Of course not. Of course not. It is only the easiest shivusim, akalim b'yoisa. Easy is not the right word. And you know, I think I speak a relatively good English, but to speak and learning, it's not the same. So, what's an easy shvus? You know, when you use the word easy, people might understand it's easy to do, it's easy to perform. What I mean is a shvus kal. So the two shvusim akalim b'yoser are amira lenochri and grama. So last week we spoke about grama. So grama, according to most Rishonim, is mutar lechatchila. The Ramah paskins in accordance to the Mordechai that it's mutar b'mukim seder. But not even Amir Lenochi is mutar b'mukim seder. So this Gemara in Ksubas Daf Samach, Tzina she'olo bo kaskasim memachoy baraglo, because it's a metakim kelacher yad v'tira b'mukim seder, is not a general rule. Tzina she'olo bo kaskasim is an exception, and so is the first halacha in that sugya. Goineach b'mukim tsar tiru kelacher yad is an exception. It's not a rule, because tsar l'choyle is less than choyle she'en b'sekona. And for choyle she'en b'sekona, we do not find the heter of kelacher yad. The only heter we find for choyle she'en b'sekona is amira lenochi. So this Gemara in Ksubas Daf Samach, she'etiru kelacher yad b'mukim tsar, and that is the din of goneach she'yonek cholav mebehema. Etiru kelacher yad b'mukim hefsed, and that is tzina she'olo bo kaskasim, is not the basic rule, it's an exception. Maybe, if time allows, we will come back to this exception towards the end of the Shiur. But as in every sugya we've been dealing with in the past 15 or 16 weeks, I would never guess that I've been with you for 16 weeks. It's an unbelievable schus, and I'm moved to the depth of my heart. But concerning the basic concept of kelacher yad, in that sugya in Ksubas Daf Samach, Rabbi Chonan and Kovetz Shiurim, Rabbi Chonan writes that kelacher yad in Shabbos is not a specific halacha only regarding Shabbos. Unlike malacha shein sichel agufo, unlike mekalko, which are dinam esiyomim in Shabbos, and the heter of malacha shein sichel agufo mekalko is because it's not malachas machsheves. Kelacher yad has nothing to do with malachas machsheves. It's a general idea b'kol ha'torah kulo. Just like we find in Psochim Chav Daled Omed Beis, shelo kederech achil is not an isi d'oraisa b'macholas asuros, shelo kederech hanoah is not an isi d'oraisa b'isurei hanoah, shelo kederech asiyas malacha is not an isi d'oraisa in Shabbos. But it's not unique to Hilchos Shabbos. It has nothing to do with Meleches Machsheves, but rather a general rule, B'kol Isurei Torah. When you perform a Ma'aseh, Shelo Kederech Hasiyosoi, there is no Isser. It is not defined as a proper Ma'aseh regarding Dinei HaTorah. Rabbi Chanan was one of the greatest Marbitei Torah in a generation of great Marbitzei Torah. He was a Talmud of Reb Chaim Brisker and of Reb Shimon Shkat. He learned 4 years by Reb Shimon, 2 years by Reb Chaim, or a year and a half, I think. So he was Mishamish, the greatest Gedolim, the greatest minds of his generation, and in his own merit, he was one of the greatest Marbitzei Torah. Rosh Shivan Branovich, and Kovetz Shurim is an amazing sefer. But he was a Rosh Yeshiva and not so much a Posek. So Rabbi Chonon writes, Kalachi Yad is not a din mesuyam in Hilchas Shabbos. It is not associated with Malachas Machsheves, but rather a din kloli, a geder kloli v'kol haTorah kula. In the shir I said on Malachas Machsheves, was it 2 or 3 weeks ago? I do not recall, because I give so many shiurim, I could no longer remember what I say, when, and where. I do remember the sugyas I speak about, but I can no longer remember when and where. I think it was 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago. One of the many sources I brought was Kalacha. And I pointed out, this is an interesting phenomenon, an exciting phenomenon. Nowhere in Seder Moed, or B'chlal in Gemara, neither Bavli nor Yerushalmi do we find why Kalacha Yad is potter. So many sigyos we find Kalacha Yad is potter. Nowhere in Bavli and Yerushalmi do we find an explanation why. Neither in the Rishonim, not even in the Beis Yosef or in Hilchas Shabbos. You need to learn Even Ezer Siman Kuf Chav Gimel to understand why Kalacha Yad is potter in Shabbos. So in Sif Aleph Even Ezer Kuf Chav Gimel, we learn that Ksivus Get Lechatchila should be Biyad Yamin. However, if you write again Biyad Smoil, B'di'evet the get is kosher. Regarding Kosev B'Shabbos, Ksiva B'Smol is potter, because it's Kalacha Yad. That's the Gemara Shabbos Kuf Gimel. So both the Beis Shmuel and the Chelkas Machaykik. So I don't know whether many of you learn Even Ezer, but the equivalent to the Taz and the Mogan Avraham in Shulchan Aruch Chaim, Taz and Shach Shulchan Aruch Yeredeya, Beis Shmuel and Chelkas Machaykik are Aaron v'Chur, Shetoimche b'Yodai, Mezeh Echad u'Mezeh Echad. They are the Noise Kalim of the Shulchan Aruch, the two great authorities in Even Ezer. So both the Beis Shmuel and Chelkas Machaykik, both of them, Sif Kot and Dalet explain. So why, if you write Biyad Smol Shabbos, you're potter? Because it's Kalacha Yad, and on the other hand, Get Shenichta B'Smol is kosher. This same question could be asked in Hilchas Tefillin, Siman Lamed Beis in Shulchan Aruch Chaim, because it is there that we learn that we should write Tefillin Biyad Yamin, but Tefillin Shenichta B'Yad Smol is kosher, just like by Get. But the Mogan Avraham doesn't deal with this question in Siman Lamed Beis. Chelkas Machaykik and Beis Shmuel deal with this question in Even Ezer Kuf Chav Gimel. Sif Kot and Dalet, then both say Shabbos is different, because Shabbos Kalacha Yad is not considered a malacha because it's not malachas machsheves. Lo kedivrei kovet shiur miksobis tafsamach. So the Beis Shmuel and the Chelkas Machaykik both say yes, Kalacha Yad Shabbos is unique to Shabbos. Kalacha Yad in Shabbos is potter because it's not malachas machsheves, just like Malach Shen Sicha Legufa and Makalkal and many, many others halachas, which I specified and enumerated in my shir 2 or 3 weeks ago when we spoke about Malachas Machsheves. Comes along the Eglei Tal. So the Avnei Nezer has a magnificent sefer on Hilchas Shabbos. All we have is 11 malachas. Yud Aleph malachas of Seder HaPas, which is the Eglei Tal. And in the Psicha to the Eglei Tal, the Avnei Nezer writes about some of the fundamentals of Hilchas Shabbos, and he deals with the question of Kalacha Yad. And he does ask, so what is unique about Shabbos that we say Kalacha Yad is potter because it's not Malachas Machsheves? And why is it different than many other halachas? For instance, Shelo Kederach Achila, Shelo Kederach Hanoah. Shavuos Daf Yud Zayin, we speak about Tumas Bayis HaMenugah. or tumas oil, haboel habayis. So the Gemara says, "Anechnis labayis derech hachorav." If you walk into a house backwards, you're not tuma mitzad haboel habayis. Kol asher babayis yitmo, but that is a different halacha. Why? Bia b'derech hachorav is not bia; it's a bia shelo kidaka. So the Eglital asks, what is unique about Shabbos that Kalachi Yad is potter because it's not Malachas Machshavos if we find similar halachas by other areas in Torah in which we also assume Chila Shelo Kedarka is not a Chila, no Shelo Kedarka is not a Nua. So the Eglital is mechalek between Shinui Benifal and Shinui Bepoyel. I don't know exactly what he means. Does he mean nifal, the result? Kach mashma medvarav. So what the Eglital argues, in other areas of halacha, shelo kederech is only if there's a shinui in the result. But by Shabbos, even though the result is normal, because if it's small, after all, you got the same two letters. Well, they might not be as nice, but some people have a sloppy handwriting with yamin. Some people could write beautiful with smile. So the Eglital argues only by Shabbos, if there's a shini b'maisa, even though there's no shini b'teitzah, still potter. That is unique to Malachas Machshavos. In other areas of halacha, it's only if there's a shini in the result. Lo yoradati l'sav datoi. Achila shelo kederech. Is that a shini in the result? After all, the person ate and he's satisfied and his belly is full. Would that be considered a shini in the result or a shini in the maisa? Maybe what he means is a shini in the essence, lav dafka maisa v'teitzor. So when he speaks about poyal and nifal, maybe it's not the act and the result, but is the shinui an essential shinui? Is it a shinui in the mahus? Is it a shinui in the very essence of the deed? Maybe that's his point. So b'kol Torah kula, it is only if the shinui is in the essence of the ma'isa. For instance, achila shelo kederech achila. So people eat b'derech ha'olam, they enjoy their food. Ein darke shelo d'malechol, if he doesn't enjoy his food, well, if he's dying for hunger, he would eat anything. Those of us like myself, who are the children of survivors, know that. So in the hundreds of Gehenna camps, concentration camps, camps of murder in Nazi Germany and in Poland and in other areas of Europe, they ate anything. They did not enjoy their food. But in normal circumstances, people enjoy their food. Otherwise, they wouldn't eat. So if a person doesn't enjoy his food, that is siddur shelo kederech achila. And the Rambam gives 3 examples of Perek Yud Daled Macholas Asuros. If a person eats boiling food that burns his throat, causes him pain and suffering, chelev chai, raw meat, which is not ra'ui la'achila. Or, third example, Erev Beidav Amar. He puts something into his food and it's bitter. So, if a person eats and he doesn't enjoy his food, causes him discomfort and pain, that is shelo kederech achila, because that is against the essence of eating. So maybe what the Avnei Nezer means is only the Shabbos. If the shinui is just b'derech hasiyah, but it's not really a shinui in the essence, you achieved your goal, so you didn't perform the malacha in a normal fashion. In other areas of halacha, that wouldn't make a difference. But on Shabbos, he's potter because it's not Malachas Machshavos. I just want to remind you, our Hagdorah and Malachas Machshavos, it's not Malachas Ha'uman. It's not the way a craftsman, a mumche, a professional would do his job. So on Shabbos, any shinui would patter. In other areas, it is only a shinu which is fundamental, which is essential, which is shinu in the essence of the malacha of the inyan. I think that Hagdara would be more reasonable. It's not the mice and the result, the mice and the titzah. In our areas of halacha, it must be a shinu in essence. I think that makes a lot of sense, and that is the way I would define it. And maybe that is what the Avnei Nesa means in Eglei Tal and the Psicha Ois Gimel. So usually I don't really trouble myself that much. Is that exactly what the Eglei Tal means? I'm not sure, I'm not convinced, but that is my interpretation of the Eglei Tal, and I think that is the way to explain it. However, Lani is Daiti. Lani is Daiti, I would go beyond that and say, it is not a fundamental assumption, that when you do something shelo kederech asiyah, it doesn't count. No. It is only in Shabbos that we find this assumption. It is only in Shabbos and Malecha Shabbos that we find if a person does a thing, and Malecha shelo kederech asiyah, he's poto. It is only because Malecha is Shabbos. It is only in very few sugyas throughout Shas that we find in other areas of halacha that shaloi kederech doesn't count. Primarily, achila v'hanoah. And I think because achila v'hanoah, as I said just a few moments ago, that is the essence of the Isur. I wrote an Arichas Gedola, more than one source in my Sforim. By Machoros Asuris and Isure Hanoah, it's not the Ma'aser that the Torah answered, it's the Hanoah. And even those Machoros Asuris that are also Ba'achila, not also Ba'hanoah, but what the Torah answered is Hanoah's Achila, not the Ma'aser Achila, but Hanoah's Achila. And I learned this from the Rambam Sefer HaMitzvos, Lo Ta'aseh Kuf Pei Zayin. This is a huge discussion, and therefore I cannot get into it because we need an hour or two just to explain this assumption. But those of you that have my Sforim, I wrote about this Kama v'Kama Mekoimus. The Torah didn't answer Ma'aser Achila, but rather Hanoah's Achila. The Ma'aser is just the Hechetins. So there are two types of Machoros Asuros. Orla, Kil Ea Kerem, Bosa B'cholav, are also Bein Ba'hanoah, Bein Ba'achila. Neveres Etzreifes, Minim Tameim, are also B'achila Muta Ba'hanoah. But by all of them, what the Torah answered is not the Ma'aser, but rather the Hanoah. So some Machoros Asuros, the Torah also called Hana Asa, and you cannot derive pleasure or benefit in any way. Some Machoros Asuros, the Torah only answered Hanoah Sachila, but it's still Hanoah. And that is why Shelo Kederech Hanoah, Shelo Kederech Achila is not also. Because the Torah answered Hanoah and not Ma'aser. So my opinion is, and this is slightly different than what I explained a few moments ago with Darakoi Shabbat Eglei Tal. It is only in Shabbos that we find when you do a malacha shelo kederech asiyah, so you're potter because it's not malachas Shabbos. Other areas of halacha, it is only specifics. We find this primarily is achila v'sano. Habor habayis b'chlal is not a din in isurim. It's a din in bayis hamenuga. So once again, I think there it's a din misuyim. It's a din misuyim and not a din kolavi. There's another concept of shelo kederech, which I wrote about in Minchas Oshra Masechet Shabbos. I think the Maramekoimus that Rabbi Gottesman gave you are based on that siman in Minchas Oshra and Masechet Shabbos. So in Shabbos Daf Lamed Tes, Rashi writes that Bishul B'chama, B'toldos Chama, there is no Isur D'Oraisa because it's Ein Derech Bishul B'tach. And many Gedolim understand Kalacha Yad, but I don't think it's Kalacha Yad. So in my Sefer, I quoted the Igros Moshe and the Minchas Shleima. maybe the two greatest halachic authorities of their age, Reb Moshe Feinstein in America and Reb Shlomo Zalman in Eretz Yisrael, the two giants. And I quoted from the Igis Moshe and the Mincha Shloima that the reason I'm a Vashal B'chama is Poto B'Shabbos because in the Mishkan, there was no Bishul B'chama. In the Mishkan, Bishul was Be'esh L'tol Do'Seyu. They put on a fire, and that was Mavir, boiled water, and that is the way they cooked the summer morning. But I wonder, because in Psochim Daf Men, we find a Mavashal Korban Pesach B'chama Potu. By Korban Pesach, there's an Isser of Bishul. It must be Tzli Eish. So Korban Pesach has nothing to do with the Mishkan. Neither does Korban Pesach have anything to do with Maleches Machsheves. So if Rashi writes, I'm a Vashal B'Shabbos, B'chama V'tol Do'Seyu, there is no Issa D'Oraisa. And just to make this clear, Toldas Chama is also Midarabanan. Gezera Oto Toldas Ur. Chama is Mutar Lechatchila. So if the reason Ein Derech Bishul Lekach, if that is Kalacha Yad, then why would it be put up by Pesach? Mevashal Korban Pesach has nothing to do with Maleches Machsheves. Neither does it have anything to do with the Mishkan. So that's a tema on the Igis Moshe and the Mincha Shloim. Kasha number 2, Kalacha Yad is always an Issa D'Rabbanan. This is a fundamental principle in Hilchos Shabbos. All the Pturim of Maleches Machsheves are also D'Rabbanan. Malacha shein sichel guf also D'Rabbanan. Makalkal also D'Rabbanan. Pochas Mikashir also D'Rabbanan. Whenever we pater a malacha because it's not Maleches Machsheves also D'Rabbanan. So how come a Vashal B'chama is Mitol Lechatchila? If it's because of Maleches Machsheves, should be also D'Rabbanan, just like any other halacha that's based on Maleches Machsheves. Why would Mekalkal HaMalacha Shen Sichel Agif be also D'Rabbanan, and a Vashal B'chama would be Mitol Lechatchila? Therefore, when Rashi says Ein Derech Bishul B'chama, it's an other Yesod. Has nothing to do with Kalacha Yad. If it would be Kalacha Yad, number one, it wouldn't be Mutar B'Pesach. Kalacha Yad as a Din Shabbos would be also D'Rabbanan. Kasha number 3. Mevashal B'chama Tveria. The Gemara says it depends. What causes Chamei Tveria to be hot? Is it because Oiverim al Pischon Shel Gehenim, and it's actually boiled and heated by fire? Or is it a natural process which has nothing to do with fire? But that's not Kalacha Yad. A person filled up a pot with Chamei Tveria. I would go beyond that. On his shaish in his kitchen, he has 2 pots. Both are boiling water. One was boiled in the sun, chamo v'tol do'seyu. The other was boiled by fire. To make it more practical and more realistic, you have a dud shemesh. Dud shemesh is only in Issa D'Rabbanan because the water was heated by sun. So many argued, no, it's Toldos Chama, because the mirrors and the glass and the Dud Shemesh is Toldos Chama. Okay, but it's still not an Issa D'Oraisa. And you had the other pot that was heated by your boiler, electricity. That is defined as Toldos Eish, and it's D'Oraisa. So both pots are on your shaish, and you have 2 eggs. You drop the egg from your right hand into one pot, the egg in your left hand into the other pot. There is no shinui mitzad Maaseh Adam. Pot number one, potu, because it's still the schama. The egg you boiled in pot number two, chayev, because that's still the school. But the bystander, the beholder, he sees no difference. 2 pots of boiling water. So that's not kelacher. There's no shinui at all mitzad Maaseh Adam. There's no heker. He did exactly the same with his right hand and his left hand. So how come one pot is poto and the other pot is chayev? This just proves once again, mevasel b'chama v'toldeser has nothing to do with kelacher, because kelacher must be a shini b'maaseh Adam, and here there's no shini b'maaseh Adam. So I want to share with you a yesod gadol, which I didn't see anywhere in the Achronim, but to me it seems a miltza de pshita. When there's a shinui, in the very essence of the source of heat, that is not kelacher. That is a fundamental tool of shelo kederech. It's not defined as bishul. It's not defined as bishul. Because the natural source of heat that people have been using for thousands of years, since this source was discovered by the very first discoverer. You probably heard this from me in the past few weeks after 16 shiurim. The first was Adam Harishon, banging 2 rocks together, achieving a spark, discovering fire. So since Adam Harishon, people have been using fire to achieve light and to achieve heat. And therefore, bishul is only be'esh v'toldoisei, because that is the most useful, available, effective source of heat. So Chazal were koveya b'roicha v'datam. It's in the cheftza of bishul. It's not in the Maaseh Adam. Nothing to do with kelacher, nothing to do with maleches machsheves. Because maleches machsheves is an oifen asiyas hamalacha. Bishul b'cham is not in the oifen asiyas hamalacha. It's the source of heat. It's the very essence of bishul. And therefore, bishul b'cham is not defined as bishul across the board, neither by Shabbos, nor by Basar B'cholav, nor by Korban Pesach. And there are 3 different areas in the Torah which there's an issur of bishul. Bishul is one of the lamates malachas, but bishul is also osur by Basar B'cholav, osur v'ashel gedi b'chalei v'imoy, and bishul is also osur by Korban Pesach. Bishul b'cham is not defined as bishul, neither by Shabbos, nor by Basar B'cholav, nor by Korban Pesach. Basar B'cholav and Korban Pesach have nothing to do with kelacher, have nothing to do with maleches machsheves. And by bishul b'chama, there isn't necessarily any heker, any shinui mitzad Maaseh Adam, like I explained before. So this is a different approach and a different yesod of shelo kederech. Shelo kederech bishul means it's not defined as bishul, because the only normal heat source that men have used since man was created was fire. So when I dealt in my tshuvas with micro ovens, it is only in our modern day and age that people have devised new methodology and new technologies. So today, we have sources of heat that are not fire. Would they change halacha? No, in my opinion, never. When we're dealing with Maaseh Adam, it does depend on the way people do things in every society, in every day and age. The Gemara says regarding Anshe Utsu, we don't say Botla Dati Eitzel Kolona. So when we deal with Kalachi Yad, it depends. How do you do things right here and now? Lefi Hamokem or Lefi Hazman. When we're dealing with Derech Bishul, it's different. It is not Kalachi Yad. It's not a Shinui B'Maseh Ha'adam. I'll give another muscle. Just L'Saver Esuoizen or L'Yasher L'Sedevora Maralev, and that's a Rashi Daf Kuf Ches in Mesechet Shabbos. HaToilish Ma'otzitz Nokuf Potu. Even though Otzitz Nokuf has a din of Mechubel HaKarka. But Ein Derech Zariya Bekach. I think Rashi deals with the Otzit She'enai Nokuf. But the concept is Ein Derech Zariya Bekach. Does Rashi mean Kalacha Yad? Definitely not. We're dealing with Meleches Koitza, not Meleches Toileish, not with Meleches Zoreya. So when the Gemara says that Toileish Ma'otzot She'enai Nokuf Potur, Rashi writes in Derech Zariya Bekach. Why is that relevant? What does Derech Zariya have to do with Meleches Koitzer? When a person would write letters Kalacha Yad, and then another person would be Oiver HaMeleches Moichek, would the Moichek be potter because Ein Derech Ksiva Bekach? Ridiculous. Of course he would be Chayiv. The Koisev would be potu, because Ein Derech Ksiva Bekach, and he wrote Kalacha Yad. The Moichek would be Chayiv. After all, 2 letters. And he erased those 2 letters. So how does Rashi explain that Toilish Ma'otzet She'enai Nokuf Potu, because Ein Derech Zariya Bekach? So once again, I think Zoreya Ba'otzot She'enoi Nokuf is similar to Mavasul B'chama. It's not a Shinui B'maisa Ha'adam. B'maisa Ha'adam, there's no Shinui. It's a big flower pot. He digs a little hole, and he puts seeds into that hole. Or he takes a little shtil, and he plants it in the flower pot. Mitzad Masa Ha'adam, there's no shini. His ptur is not Kalacha Yad. What is his ptur? Zriya, Ika Derech Zriya is Bekaka Oilam. That is Zriya. That is the way people were sowing for thousands of years, since Adam HaRishon. You plant in Karka Oilam. So if you plant in a Kli, which is not Mechubel HaKarka, Ein Derech Zariya. The Shinui is in the Chefts, not in the Maisa Odom. It's not Kalacha Yad. And because the Shinui is in the Chefts, there is no Issa of Koitza. So if a person would write letters, Bismoil, Kalacha Yad, and then another person would erase them, of course he would be Chayiv. The fact that it's not Derech Siva doesn't affect Mechika. But if it's not Derech Zariya, there is no Isra of Toilish. Because it's not a Ptur B'maisa Odom. It's not Kalacha Yad. This is not defined as Mechubel HaKarka. It is the essence of Zariya, just like Mavashel B'cham was not the essence of Bishul. So this is a new concept of Shalok Derech. Different than Shalok Derech Achila, different than Kalacha Yad Shabbos. A new approach and a new Hagdara and a new concept. Oid Rega Adabeiro. And this is a fascinating shaila. So Kalacha Yad B'Malacha Shabbos, does it relate to the Maisa or to the Malacha? I heard a story many, many years ago. And according to the story, the Stipler and Rabbi Yankov Kamenetsky, as Jungalite, were inscripted in the Russian army, in an army unit in Russia. On Shabbos, they were taken out to a shooting range for shooting practice. And they had an argument, these two great Gedolim. Yankov Kamenetsky said, we need to shoot with the left hand, and that's a ptur of kalachi yad. We shouldn't be Yisa and Yisa. No, Yankov Kamenetsky said we should shoot with the right hand, because if you shoot with your right hand, then we have some practice and some experience. According to the regulations, according to the rules, if you hit bullseye 3 times, you go back to your barracks. So the Yankov Kamenetsky argued, we need to shoot with the right hand so we stand a fair chance getting over with it as soon as possible to minimize Chilul Shabbos. The Stipler said no. Shooting with your right hand is an Isidio Raisa. Shooting with your left is Kalachi Yad. So the Yankov Kamenetsky shot 10 times and he didn't hit the target. And the Stipler would say to the Shmaya with his left hand, shot 3 times, 1, 2, 3, hit his target and went back. I like to check stories. I didn't have the opportunity to ask the Yankov himself, but I just did ask both of his children, Shmuel and Nasan, that Shmuel Sheyiche, Liyomim Toivim Baruch Yimad Bias Agoyel, one of the Gedol Yisrael and Nasan, Zeichet Tzadik Levracha. They both told me that Yankov Kamenetsky was never in the Russian army with the Stipler, so the story cannot be true. And like many other beautiful stories, some beautiful stories are not always, didn't actually happen. But maybe it did happen with another Talmud Chacham. So the other side of the story, I don't know. I think the story with the Stipler is brought in many form. I did not have an opportunity to check it out. But this is a fascinating shaila in halacha. So if you need to shooting with your left hand, would that be poter mitzad kalachi yad? Which malacha is involved in shooting a gun? Mavia. Mavia. It's fire that propels the shell. It's an explosion in the tarmir. I don't know what the parts of a bullet are defined in English. So would we say mavia is chay ben biyamin ben bismal? But shooting, definitely, shooting with your left hand is not the way to do it. When I paskin for doctors and nurses working in hospitals that need to perform halachas and Shabbos, I usually say, practice shinui, practice shinui. Practice writing with your left hand. Practice using your computer with your left hand. Because if you do things with a shinui, at least you steer clear from a malacha d'oraisa. I would not recommend a surgeon doing open heart surgery or valve surgery trying to do it with your left hand. No, definitely not. That would not be my halachic recommendation. But if a surgeon does perform his duties with his left hand, would that be a ptur of kalachi yad? Which malacha is it? Netilas neshama. By netilas neshama, there is no ptur biyad small. Actually, biyad small is potter only by koisev and by koisev b'levad, kach was Rabbi Shlomo Rishim Mem Sif Kotnchov Beis, because it's a malacha daka. And that's in Chidushe Haran, Shabbos Daf Kuf Gimel. By any other malacha chayev b'smol, only a koisev b'smol pot. But the question is, netilas neshama b'smol chayev, but performing surgery b'smol is definitely kalachi yad. It's not the way to do it. If you need to shoot, you're a police officer, a soldier, an active duty. You don't shoot with your left hand. You might hurt your friends. A friend might be killed by friendly fire. You shoot the way you practice, the way you should shoot. So shooting with your left hand Shabbos, would that be a ptur of kalachi yad? The fundamental question is kalachi yad derech asiyas hamalacha, or is it derech asiyas hamaisa? This is a machlokes between the Elia Rabba and the Eglei Tal, the Avnei Nezer or Chaim Simon Reish Tes. So the Ramo is machmir if there's a sefer and you have letters on the side of the sefer, could you open the sefer and close it? So if you have a sefer and letters are written on the side, on the pages, you open that sefer, it's moichik. You close it, it's koisef. So the Eli Rabbi writes, but if you open the sefer, close it biyad small, you have no problem because koisef is small as potter. Avnei Nezer says, no, this is a mistake. Ksiva bismol is not the derech asiyas hamalacha. But the open svarim biyamin bismol, it's just the same. So the Eli Rabbi maintains, kalacha yad depends on derech asiyas hamalacha. Malachas koisef bismol potter. The Avnei Nezer maintains, no, it's not derech asiyas hamalacha, it's derech asiyas hamayis. I think the Avnei Nezer is right. And I have a raya from Rabbi Yosef with Siman Beis. Divrei Torah shirim b'mokom echad v'shirim tfei b'mokom achar. Lamed Beis is tefillin. I mentioned before, koisef tefillin biyad small. So the Beis Yosef says, could it be that it's kosher tefillin? So if a person would write tefillin on Shabbos, is it possible to say it's okay? Because koisef b'smol Shabbos potter and the tefillin would be kosher. Yosef says, doesn't sound reasonable. So a person could write tefillin in Shabbos and the tefillin would be kosher because there's no Weiss d'oraisa. But the Yosef says, yes. We find a precedent. Zorak sakin b'shochad b'Shabbos. Shchitik sheira. But Shabbos he's potter kalacha yad. Why is he potter Shabbos kalacha yad? It's natilas neshama. Natilas neshama b'smal. We don't find a ptur. Yes. But this specific derech of natilas neshama, which is shoichet, definitely it's not the derech to shoichet by zrikas asakin. So the Beis Yosef writes, so we do find a precedent. Potter b'Shabbos, shchitik sheira. So it could be potter b'Shabbos and the tefillin would be kosher. What I learned from this Beis Yosef, natilas neshama b'smal chayiv, but this specific method of natilas neshama, which is shchita, that is kalacha yad. So if you throw a spear to an animal and you kill it, or you shoot it and an animal with your bow, an arrow, and you kill it, of course you're chayiv mishum natilas neshama, even though it's zrika. But zrika b'shchita is kalacha yad. So yes, people always killed animals with zrika, throwing spears, boomerangs, arrows. That's derech asiyas hamalacha. That's not kalacha yad. But shoichet b'zrika is kalacha yad. So this Beis Yosef proves kalacha yad doesn't depend on the malacha, but rather on the mice. So if you shoot a gun with your left hand, I think it would not be an Issa d'oraisa. Mavi b'smol chayiv. But shooting with your left hand is not the derech to shoot, and therefore there would be a ptur of kalacha yad. So whether the story was or was not, I don't know. But it's an interesting question, and the fundamental shaila is, kalacha yad, does it depend on derech asiyas hamayis or derech asiyas hamalacha? The machlokes Eli Rabbi and Avnei Nezer, and the raya from the Beis Yosef.